Three, two, one. Welcome back to the Frequency of Fatherhood Summit. Today, I have the luxury of interviewing Philip Folsom. Philip is an anthropologist, an Army veteran, and author. He's a leading expert in organizational culture development and resiliency. He lectures at USC, teaching leadership development classes at the Marshall School of Business. As the president of Wolf Tribe, it's an international consulting agency. Philip delivers transformational leadership and cultural development programs to esteemed organizations such as SpaceX, Google, Disney, and Red Bull. He's a captivating and humorous speaker, frequently sought out after conferences and events like Activision, EA, and Apple. Philip is also a co-founder of the Valor Resiliency Program and the K4 School of Men's Work, both recognized for the impact in the fields of veteran support and men leadership development. He currently resides in Venice Beach, California. He lives with his wife, his daughter, and his Belgian Malinois. Right, I read that off. That's a captivating, intro right there. Philip, I just want to first say thank you for speaking at this event. One of the things that really drew me to your content, everything that you put out, is first your aura. You're a prior veteran, just like myself, but cultural development, leadership development, and really tying that into men's work. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. And hey, shout out to all you men who are watching this right now. You committing your time and resources to not only develop yourself and your family, but also this movement of reclaiming a healthy masculinity in the world. This is what's going to save us. It always has, and it always will. So shout out to you guys who are watching.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Just like I ask many people, what drove you to this work? Like, what's your why?
Well, the why is a need. Is that in the classic hero's journey plot line of all of our lives, ultimately there is a pursuit of freedom and meaning, and this is universal for men. Is we're looking for freedom, physical freedom, right? Fighting back on all the bullshit addictions that are crippling us now. Freedom financially, across the board. There's a freedom conversation, and ultimately freedom is the ability to pursue a life of meaning, right? That's the big, it seems existential, but it's actually a very practical pursuit that is indispensable for finding a way to navigate the inherent suffering of just living, and being a man and having to protect and provide and shoulder the burdens of society, whether you're a leader in your organizations, but primarily a leader of your family. And if you don't have a strong sense of purpose, a North Star meaning, then that suffering will cripple you. So that it's the men who have the why can basically endure any what. So we're a resilient species, and we're capable of overcoming ice ages and predation and starvation, and we're able to do that if we do have meaning. And so, I couldn't have put that into words when I was your age, but there was still, we have an intuitive or instinctual drive to pursue that. And another one of the components of the hero's journey that I'm on and you're on is that we're here to break ancestral curses, and our women are there to heal the ancestral wounds. So it's a very, very different agenda. We have the same sequential steps that we're taking to pursue those agendas, but we're hunting different game. And our women are there to heal and nurture and create, and that's a healing process of all the shit that they took on from their mothers and society. But we're here to break the ancestral curse, and that's the curse from our father. Okay, that's the big one.
Yeah.
And it's at some point in the journey, whether this is Luke Skywalker going into the cave to deal with the big scary monster, which is his dark father. Well, that's him, and that's you, and that's me, is that we're terrified of becoming our father, right? Because our dads were either absent, or they were weak, or they surrendered, they gave up, or they were tyrannical. Our dads had us when they were too young, right? And nobody initiated them. So they were running an adolescent psychological operating system, fucking everything up, just the same way their dads were, because we've lost the elder wisdom connection of initiation. And so we're all having to recreate the world each generation. And we're not designed for that. We're designed to stand on the shoulders of our ancestors and simply implement what has been taught to us instead of having to fucking spend a whole life recreating it. Overwhelming.
Yeah, you dive in a lot there, and what comes to mind is that you talked about, like, we're supposed to, our ancestral wisdom, the tribes before us, and there's a period, in my own opinion, and I know you can dive into this even more, but there's a period where, like, our fathers and their fathers, there's a form of disconnection from that tribal mentality, right? Because our fathers were focused on building the American Industrial Revolution, right? Like we're building the American dream, and they were so outwardly focused. And I think that there's a lot of men, right? And one of the reasons why we threw this summit together is there's a lot of men that want to be better fathers. They want to be more present fathers. They want to be able to be emotionally available. They want to be able to help their kids through challenging times or guide them through challenging times, but they don't know how. And rather than blaming, because I think that gets you into the victim mindset, helping men take ownership and responsibility. And something that we're here today, and I know that I love every time you speak on it, is helping men have some form of initiation, right? To shape them to be better men and better fathers. And through this, build some form of kinship. And so my question is, like, how does initiation shape a man's identity and purpose?
Initiation is the process of crossing a threshold into a new identity. And there's the classic anthropological initiation, which is moving from your mother's house to your father's house. And it's the death of the boy and the birth of the man. And that's symbolized by some sort of ritual scarification or event. And that's kind of the classic initiation. And it's a requirement for men. Women have an ability to self-initiate, whereas men do not. So if you are not and have not been in a situation such as the military or sports or some other formal initiation process, you're still running an adolescent operating system, which means that you get to do whatever you want to do. Short term, it's immediate gratification, which is, I deserve to play video games. A man does not deserve to play video games, and I'm being intentionally kind of provocative, because I know that there are men who are watching this who are like, but I like my video games. And they have all these rationalizations of, well, it's helping me decompress and it's problem solving. And okay, bullshit. If you are a man, right, and have transitioned into the currency of service and kingdom, that is what you do, because it is your duty and it is your responsibility to do that. And I stress the word responsibility. Responsibility is the mature masculine, and it is the ability to respond, not react, because adolescence, when you are faced with choices, you're going to react to the easiest one. Yeah, pull up some porn, fire up your PlayStation, eat the shitty food, scroll Instagram. That's reactive, because it's your like little dopamine hit, immediate gratification, external validation. Men, we respond to the situation by making more value-based or vision-based, service-based decisions. And that word decide contains the same root as homicide and suicide and insecticide. It means to cut or kill. So when we decide to behave in a responsible manner, we kill off all of the other adolescent behaviors that might be more short-term fun. But that's the pursuit of meaning. And it does require a sacrifice of the things that we may want to do immediately. It's the deferring the one marshmallow for two marshmallows later. That classic psychological test for children.
Yeah,
So if you're watching porn and playing video games, you're eating the one marshmallow.
Yeah,
so
no,
if you can defer gratification, you get as many marshmallows as you want.
Yeah, no, I love what you're bringing there, because I do know, and I've worked with many men, like they talk about like watching porn and video games, and these are the things that we're getting caught up in. And you mentioned something about that, going back to your initial statement of like the freedom that we're chasing, right? Like that we want to have that freedom. I think there's a Viktor Frankl quote. I don't know it by heart, but it's like your freedom lies in your ability to create space between responding and reacting.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, with all of these challenges, and we'll get to the modern man, but like, how does initiation foster kinship among men? And the reason why I ask that is because I know in my own challenges, I didn't realize that brotherhood was what was going to push me forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, Viktor Frankl, he also said that the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man, and who would willingly kill half their own heart? So we cannot self-initiate. Men do not, because it requires the death of the boy, or the death of the old operating system, or the death of the small decisions. Those are sacrifices for the sacred of something that is more significant. And so that line that lines, between through our heart, that we can't willingly kill half your own heart, because that's you. We need other men to hold us accountable for that incredibly arduous and uncomfortable experience. Because it is a literal death of a worldview. It's a death of previous priorities. It's the death of short-term freedom. It's the death of pleasure in many instances. You have to be willing to sacrifice pleasure for happiness. And then you have to be able to sacrifice happiness for meaning. And those are all initiatory phases. And none of those can be conducted alone, because left alone to our own devices, we will always head for the exits. And, for all you men who have set, New Year's resolutions, and those are coming up, you've surrendered all of them within a week. And that's why you're not where you need to be in life. It's because you've bailed, you've quit, and we all quit. Lone wolves quit. Without the support, the accountability, the inspiration, the community, the kinship of other men, we all quit. And so we've been dropped into this vast pride-based world of lone wolves, trying to still conduct the big game hunts that we're built to do, but we're trying to do it alone. And that's a death sentence for wolves and men. So the kinship conversation is a mandatory requirement for the initiatory process. None of us are going to get spiritually, actualized, in shape, wealthy, committed to our families without the support of other men.
Yeah, no, and that I can personally say that that's where my life changed. Being in the military, I always was so like focused on work, but when it came to my personal life, I didn't have some type of identity. And when I surrounded myself with other men that were starting to do this type of work, I started to be called out on my bullshit. I was realizing that work, diving into work was a coping mechanism. And I think a lot of men, they're starting to wake up to that. And so, like, for me, going to the next question of like, what challenges do you believe that the modern men face in finding or creating these initiatory experiences?
Well, that's the genesis of this modern men's movement. And I know you work with Traver, Mickler, K4. There's 100 men's groups out now, which is wonderful, and they run the gamut of, I guess, the political spectrum. There's a lot of healing based organizations, which are focused more on therapeutic inner work, and then robust, dynamic, traditional masculine ethos. And wherever you fall on that spectrum in terms of political or social views, get in a men's group, find a men's group, and they for it. We're designed for it at a genetic level is to connect with other men. It's a requirement. And when we transitioned from anthropologically an honor-based culture, when we started living in communities larger than about 150 people, we were forced to degrade that honor-based culture into a pride-based culture. We were had to deal with people who are basically strangers. Strangers cannot be part of your initiation process. So there's an intimacy, there's a level of interdependence that is required for men who are going to hold you accountable. And I use the example of how many men do you have that would show up with a truck and help you move? Right? How many? Ask yourself that watching this. How many men are going to answer the call and show up with a fucking truck and a day of their life to help you move? And for most men, the number is zero. One of my mentors, Stephen Johnson from the LA Men's Center, which is, they're part of the original men's movement back in the 80s. He said, if you remove alcohol, sports, and your job, men don't have friends. That's a death sentence for initiation and accountability and everything that's great about men. So the men's movement now, in terms of all the different opportunities to engage with a conference like this or any of these communities, is something to take advantage of. And if you're not into that, get in a jiu-jitsu school. That's already that exists in just about every city, and it has a very similar operating system as a tribe, and you're dealing with the same type of kind of big, epic, scary shit that we're built to do.
Yeah, I want to ask you, in your opinion, and this is off just like kind of something that just came up from what you said, is like, why do you think there's resistance with men and leaning into men's work, or like fathers leaning into this? Like, why is there this resistance? Because I know in my area, like talking to men on the ground here, it's just like, oh, that's too touchy-feely for me.
Well, it is in a lot of ways. Because the men's movement is framed around healing, and healing is not the goal. And that's a mistake that I would pose or confront to any leader of a men's movement, is we're not here to fucking heal. Healing is an intermediary step towards meaning and service and purpose and significance. That's the goal. The goal is to be a significant father, a contributing member of your family and community, to have a deep sense of meaning and purpose in your own life that will allow you to successfully lead and keep the fire lit of our species. Healing is something we need to do in order to do that successfully. But when that is posed as, well, we're here as a safe healing community for men to blah, 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 it's like, that isn't the thing that speaks to our core. And in the same way, you could say that just getting in shape, okay, that's an intermediary step. Making money. There's a lot of men's groups that are just focused on making money. Those are all intermediary steps towards the big game of significance and purpose and all the rest of that. So that's part of the issue. And there's a tangible pivot from these men's groups that we're focused only on healing and eye gazing and, all this kind of, new age spiritual sacred, inner work, like that we did ourselves a disservice, gentlemen, by posing that as our brand, as our ethos. Masculinity is a very different animal than that. And so currently, all of these men's groups have made a substantial pivot to, dealing with conflict, right? There's boxing, there's jujitsu, there's other bigger things that are happening now in all these men's retreats. They're dealing with much more practical, tactical things, which are inherently masculine. There's a return to a much more traditional definition of what masculinity is, and doing that in a modern way seems to be the ticket. Pursuing ancient, traditional, masculine ethos, but done in a modern, healthy way.
Yeah, you mentioned the word tangible, and that's one thing that I always ask people, let's give tangibles here. Obviously you're a leader of a men's movement. There's other speakers that are leaders of men's movements that are going to be in this conference, and so how do we get back to the fundamentals? Tangibly, how do we get that, more masculine driven man, but also has this ability to I'm going to use the word stoicism, but be able to have a stoic mindset.
Yeah. I guess an example of this is, there's a big topic of polarity now, masculine and feminine, the polarity. And it's a really important topic, right? Because if you want your sex life to work, you got to reclaim that polarity. If you want to look at the specialization that happens in your household, well, your wife holds down a certain aspect of the home. She probably handles all the decision making that happened within the household, and we're designed for that. Tribally, there is a very strong matriarchal function with the women in every culture throughout every era, and they handle the decision making within the tribe. So it's scheduling, resource management, all those things. And the men handle the extra tribal functions of culture, travel, territory, hunting, like that, and that but handed back and forth. And so we're designed for that. And that's polarity. However, when that conversation slides into the inner feminine of men, well, getting in touch with your inner feminine, that's where things get a little wonky, I believe, because what is feminine in men? What are they taking from us, from our masculinity, and saying is feminine? Compassion, caretaking, what is your inner feminine? And I would propose that that's all masculine. All of those things, compassion, patience, nurturing, those are masculine functions as well. And so I think that's where the polarity of conversation gets inauthentic and deeply non-traditional, is when we slide into that space. And I think that that's some of the things that have turned off some of the traditional blue collar men of our society, which is why there is a resistance to men's work. Because men's work is an artificial construct that's filling a vacuum. And, nature abhors a vacuum. There are things we need. So the industry of men's work has blossomed to fill that vacuum. And some of it has not worked. And that's true for every human expression. There's going to be innovation and exploration, and the things that don't work are going to drop off. The things that are high efficacy behaviors, those have stayed. So you'll notice that ice baths 10 years ago were very fringe. That was some weird fringe shit. Wim Hof and like what? Breath work, even jujitsu, hunting. Like this was all kind of fringy stuff. And then there's a whole bunch of really wonky things that, we explored in the men's work industry that are being quickly shoveled off because it doesn't function, it doesn't work. So there's a critical mass of behaviors in the men's movement that you can see being reproduced in almost group. They're classic traditional things, goal setting, accountability, physical fitness, some form of spiritual practice, emotional regulation, the ability to reintegrate from work back home, some sort of purification process. Like these are all ancient, mandatory skill sets for healthy masculinity.
I love that you bring that up, because that was leading into my next question, is like these ancient mandatory practices for masculinity. How do we kind of, I don't want to say adapt, but how do we start to bring that into initiation practices in the modern society? Like how do we get this rolling? Because I think that's the big piece that's missing. Like is we need to have some form of initiation for boys to become men, and then also additionally for men to become fathers.
Well, the classic initiation, which is an event, that's a classic event that happens at adolescence when you're taken from your mother's house, literally your mother's house. Your mom basically raises you until 7 or 8, right? And her job is basically twofold. She's there to keep you safe, because if she didn't, you'd fall out of trees and die. Don't climb that tree, honey. Like, okay. Don't pet that scary dog. Okay. And thanks, mom. Like otherwise it'd be half of us that were dead if we didn't have our moms that were, trying to keep us safe. And then secondly, our mothers domesticate us, because we're little shit throwing savages at our core, So the fact that, we learned how to wipe our ass and brush our teeth and not do inordinately dangerous things, that's our mother's responsibility. If we don't move into our father's house, then that's all we have. Safe, domesticated, socially acceptable, nice guys. That's the current state of masculinity. We move into our father's house, then we realize that we have responsibility for duty and service and other large scale functions. So that's the classic initiation, but that process is happening on an ongoing basis. We're constantly in the process of initiation. So when you become a father, that is an initiation. And so you become a man, That's your first initiation. You get promoted into leadership, like you were in the military. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, I don't get to just do whatever I have to do for me. I now have to handle me and all the other people who are looking to me for modeling leadership. And then there's the fatherhood conversation. That's another initiation. And to be able to successfully become a father, you have to accept and grieve the death of all the things before that. I love riding motorcycles. It's one of my deep passions. And I haven't ridden a motorcycle in 15 years. And I owned the fastest motorcycles in the world. It was part of my identity. I was the dude with the fucking fast bikes. And when I became a father, that had to die because I could not afford to die because I have to serve this person. So that was one of the things that goes on the altar of sacrifice to become a father. In addition to 100 other deeply painful sacrifices. That's an initiation. And so fatherhood, it not only is, but needs to be seen as an exalted position in the same way leadership is an exalted position. And it should be celebrated and acknowledged as being a very high level of masculine achievement, is to be a great dad. I mean, it should be a sense of, tremendous pride and also external acknowledgement. And you'll notice that the men who are not capable or willing to make those sacrifices, they're shitty dads. And our society is filled with shitty dads who are not willing to make those sacrifices. So the initiation process is ongoing as we move through life.
Yeah, I love what you said there because I was thinking about that. Not all fathers are great dads, right? And so thinking about all of this is how can initiation and building kinship be applied more?
I think I lost you, brother.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Okay.
All right. How can initiation and building kinship be applied more into fatherhood? Because just like you said, right, we have to, there has to be some type of awareness for men to realize we have to bring celebration to fatherhood. We have to put it on a pedestal. We need to bring importance because I think that's what's, in my own opinion, I think we're starting to do that. We're starting to bring recognition. Obviously, some people the messaging around it may be, misconstrued. And so a lot of men are running away from it because of, we're talking about emotional intelligence, literacy, and it's not, I personally don't think that it's being directed towards, the message is not directed towards where we want to go. So how can initiation and building kinship be more applied to fatherhood?
There needs to be communities and this is the men's conversation, but it may be just and mothers do this really well. There are active, mothers groups, and they support each other, and they plan and implement birthday parties. Like, how many birthday parties did you go to, dude?
I've gone to many.
Yeah. And they were all shitty pizza parties at some lame place with plastic tablecloths, and all the dads sat around and went, this is fucking lame. You did it too. Every man here has gone to some cheesy place where the wives organized that. They did all that shit. We need to be able to do the things that are fulfilling for us. We need to build those. And there's when we talk about sacrifice, there's a maladaptive version of that, which is called martyrdom. And that's not a successful definition of sacrifice. And ideally, as fathers, we're in a leadership role. and leadership's tricky with this, because leadership should be us in the service of other people, and it is. But the greatest form of leadership is to model something that we want our children to emulate. So do we want to model to our kids going to a shitty plastic tablecloth birthday party? And I don't want to be, I don't want to be here, but I'm here because it's the right thing to do. I'm not happy, but I'm here because I'm being a good guy. Like, so you're passing that on to your kids? You want to pass on martyrdom to your kids, as opposed to establishing something that is fulfilling and exciting and meaningful, and including your kids in that. Include your kids in the things that you are passionate about, and let them adopt that modality of pursuing your passions. You have to model self-care and that quest for freedom and meaning. You have to model that, and that's a slight but very important pivot of the way we lead. And so many men are self-sacrificing, which in a martyrdom way, and therefore perpetuating that story that that's the way things have to be. And that wasn't the case, I think, in our history, where we're bringing our kids out to learn how to hunt, or learn how to take care of horses, or show them our career, or show them things that we're passionate about. And so, that's the root of the leadership initiation process that we're modeling. But finding other men who are aligned in the things that you are passionate about, and then bringing kids into that conversation, either boys or girls, that's the greater form of vibration or vitality that we do need to start modeling more.
Yeah, I love that, because I think we're on the front lines. It's our job to normalize, like when this term that I hear and I cringe when people are like, oh, it's toxic masculinity. But I think that people aren't used to masculine men being assertive, having clarity, having vision, having purpose, being able to articulate that, having boundaries, having standards, being the standard, right? And so like we have to normalize that. We have to communicate that in the work we do. And it's not challenging or it's not easy in the sense, because a lot of men, when they step into their power, when they step into that authenticity, I think, and I'm just throwing this back to you with this thought, is there's a lot of men that this core wound of abandonment comes up, right? Like we might scratch the surface on some core wounds where they're like, well, if I step into this, I might feel isolated. And goes back to initial something you said earlier, is like, if we're a lone wolf, if we're trying to go by ourselves, we're going to end up dying, right? And so I feel like that's where there's a hesitancy, so to speak, with stepping into our authenticity, taking control and responsibility of our life.
Yeah. I wanted to just talk about Alex and Philip real quick, because it does relate to that.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Because it was an unusual thing. Alexander the Great, right? He was one of the greater men of his era and throughout history, and conquered the known world in his era by 16. He was that guy. But he was not that guy in a vacuum. His father was Philip of Macedonia, who was a king unto his own right. And I can't remember the sequence correctly, but Aristotle taught Plato, right? Plato taught Philip, and Socrates was taught by Plato. And so Alexander the Great he was the recipient of a tremendous foundation of knowledge. He didn't just arise fully formed as the great. He was a boy who was raised by a great man, who was mentored by great men, and he made sure that that was available to his son. And so that's obviously a historical lesson, but it's metaphoric as well. This is one of the things that we have to do, is reclaim some of that lineage of ancient wisdom, whether it be the Stoics or all of the other great wisdom sources that we have. And the breaking of the ancestral curse is to have it stop at you. Because Philip was not of Macedonia, was not successful in his goals. And so he wanted to liberate his son from his self-limiting beliefs, which were based on, for all of us, two things. You mentioned abandonment, and the other one is inadequacy. So all of our self-limiting beliefs and old stories are stemming from one of those two sources. I'm either not safe and will be abandoned, or I am not significant and I'm inadequate. So our job is to address those issues of our father, and it's redeeming or resurrecting our father from the underworld, which means we're acknowledging his shortcomings, his failures, accepting that he did the best he could with what he had, and recognizing that we have access to everything, right? Currently, the entire corpus of human knowledge is right here. There's no excuses anymore. And so, Philip of Macedonia had Plato. He gave Socrates to his son, so his son could live his full potential life. And there's a wonderful little anecdote, which is kind of metaphoric here. It may not be historical, but there was a mighty horse, Bucephalus, which was the most noble, stallion in Macedonia, and he was unrideable. And so there was a big challenge in the marketplace that anyone who could ride this horse not only got to have him, but achieved this high status in Philip of Macedonia's army. And the horse was a monster. He was a terrifying man-killing monster. And Alexander watched him, and he realized that what the horse was really terrified of was his own shadow. Whenever he saw his shadow, it terrified him and made him violent. All of our anger comes from fear. And so Alexander took his bridle and faced him towards the sun, so he could not see his shadow, and then was able to ride him. And that was the horse he rode throughout his entire conquest, was Bucephalus. So you keep your face to the sunshine, and you don't have to deal with the shadow. So there's a strong elder wisdom kind of metaphor built into that was the thing that accelerated or liberated the greatness of Alexander. And it came from his father, who made it available to him. And it came from his elder wisdom that from those mentors of, Plato and Socrates. So those are all stories, but that's also us. We all have fathers, and we're going to become fathers. And so the ability to integrate the elder wisdom that is available now, whether it be from mythology or the Bible or whatever wisdom source that makes sense to you, it is our responsibility to access that and to implement that with our children.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And a lot of things that come up, like I'm going to validate a lot of your points here, is like I was teaching having a men's circle a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about our shadow having our father's shadow incorporated in that, right? And so part of us is meeting our fathers where they were at, right? We can't expect them to meet us where we're trying to be, but meet them where they're at. For having the understanding, like you said, that they did the best they could with what they had, and then incorporating that into your journey and trying to become better, and being a well-resourced father. I think at the end of the day, like if you know the legacy I want to leave for my kids, and I hope other men can have the same, is like, how can I be the most well-resourced father to give my kids the most opportunities to be the best versions of themselves without me hindering them?
Yep. And this involves you living for yourself, not living just for them. You're not going, because then you're passing on the curse of martyrdom. You have to live it now. Like you have to be in shape. You don't just work on your kid being in shape. You get in shape. Your children are never listening to you, but they're always watching you. It's what you, and this is a leadership axiom that is universal. None of your people are reading what you're sending them or listening to what you're telling them. They're doing what you are modeling. And so you have to embody that, that growth, that service, that vitality of being that man in full. And that's the greatest lesson. You are your greatest lesson to your children.
Yeah, I love that because, like, in my opinion, like the integrity, this could be a whole different topic, but integrity, true integrity is when our thoughts meet our words, and our words meet our actions, right? And that's when we'll start to like gain momentum to actually those that are following, right? Like you said, everybody's watching, and you can either be a good role model, you can be a good leader or a bad leader, and it's your choice, right? And it's always we're always a choice away from unlocking another level in our own life, right? We can either lean into it and accept that new levels, new devils, right? Or we can stay stuck and we can just stay complacent and the wheels sticking. So Philip, like I want to transition this. A lot of men listening to this, how do I start this initiatory practice, or how do I start to take steps in becoming a better father? Like if you had 2 to 3 minutes with your younger self or these men, like what would your message be?
Well, back to the topic of kinship, community, a men's group, or a church, or the fucking Masons, or whatever the community is, and there are lots available to us now. Not only do we have to model the example, but we cannot successfully model that example without the support of other men. We will always do more for others than we will do for ourselves. And this is a truth that is hidden in plain sight in front of all of us, is that we rise to the occasion when we're required to for other people. Service and reciprocity are built into our DNA as men. So you're never going to be great for yourself. That's a brutal truth. But you will be great in the service of others. So that's the wheel that keeps turning. Is yes, we do have to be great so that we can break ancestral curses and model success to our kids. We will not be great without understanding that that needs to be witnessed. The only time people will play a sport injured is in the service of their teammates. The only time that you will sacrifice something substantial is in the service of your community. So in order to be that man, you do have to have that honor-based culture that is in place. And so that's the beginning of the initiation phase, is the recognition that you cannot self-initiate. All systems lead towards entropy. All commitments bleed energy. particularly in an era when we're just besieged by a storm of distraction that is offering immediate gratification, dopamine hits. And for those of you who are watching this right now, you made the choice to do this versus scrolling on Instagram. And scrolling on Instagram is a lot more fun than listening to this. Right? So there is a sacrifice that has to be made. And generally, you're probably not taking this journey alone. You're either actively looking for a community, or you already are embedded in a community that is supporting this journey that you're on right now.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I just want to close with this, like, men that are listening, how can they work with you? What programs do you have? What offers? Because you just dropped a lot of fire that I think that it's like that flashbang effect, right? You throw the grenade, and then the actual aha moment's going to come, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of people interested in everything that you're offering.
I'm on most of the social media platforms, except for TikTok, which I don't quite understand. So don't look for me on TikTok. I may be on there, I don't know, but it would be purpose, other stuff. But I'm on Instagram as Philip Folsom, LinkedIn, where I do my professional work. So Philip with one L, Folsom like the prison. And my consulting agency is Wolf Tribe, and you can find that at mywolftribe.com. And the men's group that I'm part of is called K4, and that stands for King of the Four Houses. It's the four masculine archetypes, k4men.com.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Philip, for your time today, and look forward to speaking in the future.
All right. Hey, great job for doing this, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I know this is serving you, and it should. That is something that you are modeling with this, is, you deserve to win.
Absolutely.
So you are in service of other men with this, but you're also serving yourself. And that's an example of not martyring yourself, of leadership. So good job to you, young Jedi.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. That means a lot.